Hello and welcome to the live stream where I'm celebrating 300 subscribers with my friends. Well, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Well, obviously, my name is Teresa. You're in my channel. And over here somewhere, because the order changes, we have Marshall. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, congratulations for 300 subscribers, Teresa. It's
Thank
definitely
you. Thank you.
well deserved. And I look forward to more coming soon. Um, a lot of you might know me. Marsh makes comics on YouTube and Marsh Comics on Twitter and Instagram, and I make comics.
Cool. Cool. Mike.
Yes, coffee burps over here. Um, I'm Mike. I make comics too. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy you got 300 subscribers. I'm happy to see you guys. Out of all you three, we haven't hung out since this whole thing,
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm just happy to be here and see you all.
Me too.
Cool. And Jan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jan. I'm from Holland, and I've been moving around a lot. And in the meantime, working on my comic books.
Cool. So we're all here. We're all comics people, and today we are going to talk about focusing on what you can control. Because as we all know, we're in a bit of a situation that is a bit nuts, and we were brainstorming topics for this stream, and we thought this would be the one that would be positive without being fake positive. So this is what we have. So the first talking point, I think it was you, Marsh, that brought it up. So I would like to tell you to tell us what you were thinking about when you introduced this. Is chaos or disruption is inevitable. That was your first talking point. So what were you thinking about?
Well, I guess it's just a lot of times I feel like in life I've always been this way. When I first wanted to make comics, or anything really, it's always like, okay, well, I'll make my comic when I've done this or when I've done that. I'll make my comic when I have, the kind of paper I'm supposed to use. Okay, I got the paper. Well, now, I need that Winsor Newton brush, so I can't make comics yet. I'll wait till I get that, I'll wait till I've created the character. Oh, I've created the character, how it looks, but, I don't really know its personality, so I'll wait till that happens. So creatively that happens, but also, I can't make comics yet because my art's not good enough, or I can't make comics yet because, I don't have a stable situation in life. I don't have my own studio. I just have, my room at home or something. I still live with my parents. Let me move out first, then I can make comics. So it's like there's always like something in the way. There can always be something in the way, and the thing is the situation's never going to be perfect, and even if it is, that might not even be the best the best environment to make comics. So you got to kind of embrace the chaos, I think, no matter what situation. And right now, some of us are in an even better situation to make comics because we're maybe home, or maybe it's not so much like that for you. There's a lot of chaos going on. There's a lot of worry, fear, things like that. But you can still make things happen. So you got to kind of embrace the chaos, I guess, is where I was thinking with that.
Yeah, I can agree with that. There's never any stable, perfect conditions in life, and chaos is always looming. What do you guys think?
Oh, totally. Chaos is always inevitable. I completely relate to what you were saying, Marsh, about, you start a project, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, you start a project and comics take so long. It's like you're bound to run into something, some bill you didn't anticipate or some life event or something, just normally, this is, I don't want to say this is par for the course. This is a little different, but, it's another hurdle. It's another challenge. It's another little, roadblock in your way that, was probably inevitable anyways. If it wasn't this, it'd be something else, So, yeah, I think all that, prior training of getting through different events in life is kind of, still appropriate now, even though it's a little more severe, the same principles apply. It's just a challenge that we got to get through.
Yeah. What do you think, Jan? You are a chaotic person. You should be comfortable with this.
So
Actually, but actually, I'm not. I myself am not chaotic. You know, I like to move around, sure, but but like my routine is I'm very set in my ways, kind of thing. You know, I just
Yeah.
need to have my little space at home to go home to, so I can work on my comics. You know, and the thing that Marshall just brought up, like you need to have this before you can. I always feel like, in spite of the 100 days of making comics and knowing better, I've always felt like, well, I don't have time. I need to have the whole day off in order to get something going, you know?
Mm.
And I'm still like that today where, I have the whole day off and I'm literally just kind of mulling around for 3 hours on the internet and distracted before I finally get going. And then once I get going, I don't want anything to stop me, you know?
Mm. Yeah, I can completely relate to faffing about extra when you have extra time. In fact, like,
Yes.
I don't know who told me this, but someone told me one time, the more time you have, the more time you waste. And I find that is the biggest truth in my life. So having more time doesn't necessarily, or having more resources, or having less of something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do
Yeah.
better. Of course, I think there's a point of inflection. Like there's a limit to the chaos and the disruption you can take. But if the balance is right, I think you can get a lot done despite circumstances. To be sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the second point you had here is like that what we might think of ideal conditions often are not the most fertile for creativity and innovation. And I think this connects to what we're saying. And I completely agree. When I read that, I was thinking about a video I made recently, and I was talking about the different industries in America, in Europe, and in Japan, and how these constrictions of the markets and of the publishers created, yes, restrictions, but it also created opportunities for people to be creative in different ways, because there is such a thing as giving a person too much freedom, to the point where if you give them too much freedom, it's like you just give them more rope to hang themselves with. That's what I find.
yeah, freedom is tricky. It's a good thing, but it can be a double-edged sword for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, that's the thing with comics to me, or any creative outlet is, you always, for me, like I always think of like when I was younger and I was in like art class, or even like whenever I had to do like some kind of book report or project at school. I would always be like, okay, because I wasn't necessarily the greatest student. I was kind of lazy, but at the same time, I did like school. I liked learning, and there would be like a project that come up and be like, oh, you could do even like a science project. Like you could do anything you want. Like sometimes the teachers would be like, you can do anything you want, and I'm like, I could do anything I want. All right, let's go. Let me do. I'm gonna do this, and this, and then I would get like kind of procrastinate a lot, and it would be like the night before, and I'm like, oh, I had all these big plans, and now I just got to make sure I do something so that I get some kind of grade. And I've done that so many times with art as well, even just a drawing. Like I was actually doing a little live stream before this just because I wanted to. I was doing some warm ups, and I can't really do warm ups before I work on like my comic. Every time I try, it just gets too involved, And so I was drawing Shredder because there's this whole six fan arts challenge that's going.
Yes. Yeah.
So I got
Yeah.
suggestions from people, and so I'm like, okay, I'll do this. Maybe I can and do this. And then I'm like, okay, well then I added a live stream to it. Okay, let's do a live stream. I'm gonna do another one later, but I could help promote like Teresa's live stream while I'm doing that. So I did that, and I think it stayed pretty much under control, but at the same time, it's that same concept of like it can never just be simple. I can never just do a little like sketch and be done with it. It's got to become this big production. Oh, maybe I'll color this. Oh, I'm looking at other people's fan art things, and I'm like, oh man, I could do so much more. So it always gets so big. Freedom is definitely a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I think I could definitely relate to that. I overcomplicate everything I do. For sure. But
I was thinking about you specifically when he was talking. I was like,
sure
I bet
everybody
Mike
knows
can
me.
relate to this.
Yeah, for sure. But to throw like a little light at the end of that tunnel, I think an important thing to kind of curb that is to give yourself limitations, especially anybody who's stuck at home now who hasn't been. Oh, just limits, limits. Maybe give yourself a certain chunk of time, even though you have the whole day. Do like 8 hours or 5 hours or 2 or whatever, just so that you still feel like you have a limit and you don't have infinite time. That kind of stuff helps. And you're talking to like the master of overcomplications. you gotta find ways to give yourself boundaries and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's actually interesting. Like putting in artificial limits, I think is really helpful. I mean, and that's again talking about the topic. The focus on what you can control. Like that's the thing. Like if you have too much freedom, put some controls in there. And that'll
Yeah.
actually. I feel like with those limitations, like the saying, limitations breed creativity. I think it's totally true, and I do that a lot of times with my comic projects. I'll be like, I'm doing this comic, but I'm only going to do it in black and white, or I'm doing this comic, but I'm going to do it in this style, or something like that. And I don't know. I think that definitely helps.
Yeah, for sure. I got one example actually, just from the book that I'm working on now. You guys all know how long I've been working on this, and it was always open-ended. I didn't know exactly how long it was supposed to be, or how many pages per issue even, or how many issues. It was just this kind of never-ending thing that could be anything. But this year I kind of just arbitrarily decided about 12 issues. I mean, it's less than what it could be, but maybe more than I can do. But let's see about that. And then when I started writing for 12 issues, I realized, oh, okay, well, the story I have isn't gonna be enough to fill 12. Let's try 10. So I narrowed it down to 10, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I could do it in 10. But then if I could do it in 10, maybe I could do it in 7. And just the practice of putting a limitation on allowed me to like finally kind of see what it was that I was trying to do, and at least get to work. I mean, it was arbitrary. I didn't think I was going to fill those issues. I didn't know what was going to happen, but because I had that limit, I was able to actually see what it was and adjust. And sometimes if you don't have that at all, I mean, you just spin your wheels forever. It could be anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I can totally relate to the whole idea of you could do anything. It's like I could do anything, and that translates as I will do nothing.
Yeah.
And I think part of the issue with me, and I don't know if you guys have the same problem, is that when I can do anything, I start envisioning things that are beyond my reach for one reason or another.
Mhm.
And what tends to happen to me is that eventually I just I envision this perfect thing, and then when I'm faced with the reality of my capabilities and my limitations, I start procrastinating because I cannot face the reality that I will not
Yeah.
produce the thing that I've been thinking about all this time. And
Mhm.
it's just so ridiculous. So sometimes I do like to take Marsh's, like I think we all have those points that we drive to the ground because we really believe in them. And I think one of Marsh's ones is that just make comics. Don't even stop to think about it. Just make them. And I do agree a lot with him in that sense, because I've done that so many times of like, I'm going to create this thing and I could do anything. So I'm going to do this masterpiece. And it's like, you cannot do that. And you cannot accept that you can't do that. So then you are frozen and you do nothing. So
Yeah.
I think it's part of knowing yourself as well and
Oh, yeah.
accepting your limitations.
Totally. If you're Gaz said in the chat, project creep is real, and that is so true. Like if you have a small thing and it gets, blown out of proportion, again, that comes down to knowing yourself too, and knowing that you're capable of that,
Yeah.
It looks
Yep.
like we lost Marsh.
No, he's there, but he's just hiding in the shadows.
Do you guys hear me? Sorry.
Whoa, that was really creepy.
I could be more creepy.
I hope everyone saw that live.
What happened?
You were like
You see my-
backlit like a super
This-
villain. Like,
There is Project Creep and there's Marshall Creeps.
Yeah.
There's the two of them.
I I guess that's what happens when I was trying to do, I saw you guys doing some drawing and I'm like, maybe I should work on my comic while I'm doing this.
Yeah, I am working on a comic because I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely like, I don't care if this is a stream. I need to get this done. How about you, Jan? What do you think?
Well, the last I heard was Mike talking about the project creep. But then I kind of like something Marsh was saying before and yourself. I've had the misfortune lately of all this technology slowly breaking down because it's getting too old and so I haven't been able to do videos like I used to. I'm happy that Photoshop is finally running because I didn't have my Mac for like 8 months, and then I finally managed to fix it. And what I found was that as all these pieces of technology were just kind of taken away from me, it actually helped focus me because the tech ability to do anything you want was actually what kept me from just focusing on making the comic book. You can just, all you need is pen and paper, really. But if you envision that you're gonna come up with this perfect run of the kind of comics that I used to read myself, and you're constantly looking into the software that you can use and all these tutorials that you want to check out. I just found that I was spending so much time on learning how to do it rather than doing it. And then once my computer broke down, not my computer broke down, my car broke down and all that stuff, it was like, well, but I guess I can just draw on paper for now. And then I actually finished, 25 pages that I'm now coloring now that Photoshop is up and running again. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of, what you can control for me. That,
For sure.
yeah, less technology seems to be working better for me.
Yeah.
It's a good point. I definitely think that that more technology.
Speaking of which,
can
is the sound
definitely
coming
be
through all right? Because it seems to stutter a little. So
I can hear you okay.
I can hear you, but Gas is saying, and I don't know if this is a prank, probably
Okay.
not, that Jan, you are super quiet, and Marsh, you are super quiet, and then Mike and I are super loud. So Mike and I are going to whisper, and you guys need to get closer to your mic. Okay. So I'm going to move my mic like that.
Practicing my ASMR.
Yeah, and hopefully you can hear me better. I'm a little closer.
So,
Okay.
so we officially have Gaz as a sound check guy.
He's the sound engineer.
Yeah, I'm actually paying him to do this. So better do his
Nice.
job. Right. So the next point where I think this was Marsh's point, or maybe it was, this was Mike's point. Well, I don't know. Somebody point.
Somebody.
I don't know. Saying that comics are the perfect medium if you're missing having control in your life because you get to control the whole world.
That's Marsh.
That's
Actually,
Marsh.
Uh,
I heard, I think Scott Circlin said it last on the Artcasters too. That random thought escaped.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is a cool thing. A lot of times when people say like, "Why do you make comics?" And I've heard a lot of people say, if you were to think about trying to make a movie or some other mediums, it can be really hard. You have to design a set, or you have to, find locations. You got to get permissions to shoot in those locations. You got to get actors and actresses and, props, camera gear, all this crazy stuff. It costs a lot of money. There's so much to it. And that's one thing that's awesome about comics, and this is why a lot of people make comics, is because they can tell the full story and have control over every aspect a lot easier. And, in a situation that we're all in, where we have, less mobility, we have less control, it might be comforting to be able to have that kind of control in another situation, at least, to kind of get you through,
Totally. Yeah, that actually, what you just said ties into something that I feel very strongly about recently, about this idea of not necessarily control, but kind of how we frame things and the kind of messages that we deliver too. So, for example, in a comic book, you can make a story about what's going on now where we win, and in creative ways and stuff to give people hope or to give people a perspective on maybe how to look at things or things that maybe we can do that we didn't know that we could do. And it doesn't have to be so obvious. You could, bury it in symbolism and put it in a superhero story. But I mean, that's what people do. I made a post on Facebook not too long ago referencing the Great Depression here in America, and that's when a lot of the superheroes that we know were created. It's when Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Captain America was not too far after. I mean, and those are iconic heroes that give people hope, that give people a different perspective on what was going on at the time. And they've lasted to today. They still stand for those things, just in a different way. And it's a great time to take control as creators, do what we do best, and create those kind of symbols of hope for people too. If you want to, you don't have to, obviously, but it's a form of kind of taking control of the situation for sure, and it helps other people too because it puts that little seed of hope in their mind as well.
Yeah. Yep. I read that post you made, and I was thinking about the idea of one of the things you put forward is like, and now is the time to create for other people. And I was just looking at some of my friends from here. One of my friends is creating like tutorials on Facebook for children to draw, and he does one every day so that kids can sit down and draw for a little while. And like I think. He's getting a lot of engagement and a lot of people talking about him because of this. And initially it was just the idea of, well, parents are going crazy teleworking with kids in the house. So maybe if you have the little broadcast here at certain time of day, they can sit down and draw and leave them alone a little bit, and have some fun. And so it is true that regardless of the circumstances, there's always something positive you can contribute to other people. And that's something I read, and I thought, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, definitely. And to Mike's kind of the older comics, I just specifically, even with that, thought about Captain America and a situation where World War II was going on, and people were starting to feel the threats of what was going on with that, and not a lot of people were really 100%. I mean, I don't remember, I wasn't around, but this is what I've read. That people were actually, not sure what was, like, it wasn't as clear as we see it with Hitler and Nazi Germany and stuff. Like,
right.
It wasn't as clear at that time as we see it in hindsight, but that was actually kind of a big deal. Like, there was scary things going on, and we needed to kind of have, like, the whole superhero genre kind of popped out of some of these things, because it's like, okay, we can at least imagine having control and having victory, and one way we can kind of express that is through this medium of storytelling, making comics and stuff like that. And then you see, the first, Captain America, he's, punching Hitler, and it's like
classic.
It is classic, and it's such a, if you can't control it, at least you can imagine it, and there's a lot to be said for imagination, for envisioning a hopefully good outcome, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things we were talking about when we were trying to decide the topic of the stream. We were saying, how can we be positive without being fake positive? And I think imagining a future where we win or where good things happen is one way of being positive without being fake. It's like you can use your imagination and imagine like Captain America punching a Nazi because that makes you happy, and that will make other people happy. And so in a way, even though we're not, the most important thing right now, I think bringing visions of the future that are positive will always have that element of importance, because when people lose hope, they become very cynical and they become very distrustful, and I don't think is the best place to be at as a society or as a person.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. And that brings me to the next point, which is mental health. Okay, so I think this was your point, Mike. Like letting go of expectations you put on yourself before this happened, and allowing yourself to pause and even grieve so that you can recover and think more clearly.
Yeah.
And I think I can totally relate to this, because I don't know. I think I talked to you beforehand that I've been for a couple of weeks when this whole thing happened. I was just in shock. I was just doing nothing. Like what? Well, not doing nothing. Working but I lost all of my routines. I lost all of my good habits, and I was just sat there going like, "What the heck? What's happening?"
Yeah, me
And
too.
it was very disconcerting because I didn't. No, to be honest, now thinking back, it is the typical thing I do when something unexpected happens. I just freeze. The fight and flight thing doesn't work with me. It's just me. I freeze like a rabbit, and I just go like, "What do I do now?"
No fighting, no fleeing. Just what's going on?
Yes, absolutely.
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, mental health is super important. I thought about it because when this first started happening, I had just wrapped up my final outline for my comic, and I had been in a very steady routine since the beginning of this year. That's literally all I've been working on is my comic. And that's kind of a lie. I did start out doing some commissions, but most of the year has been the comic. And then all of a sudden this happened, and it was like you said, I was just like a deer in headlights for the first couple weeks. And a lot of this kind of hits close to home because I got family and friends who are nurses, so I'm worried about them. And it's all valid. That's what I had to kind of come to terms with and tell myself eventually is like, look, man, this is like grief. This is like a shared grief across the world. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty. There's a lot of, everyone's trying to get to the bottom of all the information too. There's good information, there's misinformation, there's sensationalization of all kinds of stuff, but it is real and it is happening, and it is something that, we are all forced to pay attention to. And it's okay if you don't, meet the same quota you did a few weeks ago. It's a little bit of a different situation. I wasn't allowing myself to feel that way at first, and that was making it worse, I think, simply because, when you, it's kind of like what you were saying before, Teresa, about setting yourself up with, a project that maybe your skill isn't at the level to complete or something. It's very similar to that, except this time it's harder to recognize because before all this, you were able to meet that deadline. You were able to do so many pages in such time. You were able to do, this, that, and the other thing on top of each other. But now, I mean, it's a little different. And we all have to kind of look at ourselves, know yourself. For everybody, it's a little different. It's not going to be the same for everyone. But, if you're like a salmon swimming upstream against this and not getting anything done, then maybe take a step back and allow yourself some time to relax, play a video game, watch a movie, take a walk in the park if you're able to and allowed to, call family, call friends, make sure everyone's okay, all of that stuff. Because it's the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think we're all being forced to face our fundamental needs right now, our foundational, are we safe? Do we have food? Do we have money? Are our friends and family safe? Do they have food? Do they have money? Do they have shelter? All that stuff. And that's no light thing, so it's okay to focus on that stuff, I say, for your own mental health. From what I understand, from what I go through, because I deal with chronic depression, you kind of have to deal with that stuff first. If you don't, you're not gonna, those higher levels of thinking can't even engage in the same way. Like you have to know you're safe and okay. You just do. There's special types of people out there that can operate in that fight mode, but I think even in those circumstances, it's still, take a moment to pause and make sure that there's nothing that's in the back of your mind that you're worrying about. Tend to that stuff. Meditate, pray, whatever it is that you do to center yourself and orient yourself.
I cry.
Do that.
Meditate, pray, cry is fine. I just sit down and cry. What's happening? And then I feel better.
What was
Yeah,
that? I'm thinking of the '90s song, the Three Non-Blondes, the "Hey Yeah," that song.
yeah.
What's going
Almost,
on?
but a bit out of tune, but more or less. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like that. Y'all know it though.
No, I meant like if I did it crying, it would be out of tune.
Oh
The
yeah.
tune was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful. I'm glad that I feel like it took a little while. Like it took about a week of or a couple weeks of freak out, and then people are starting to actually address, with what we're all going on, the virus and everything. Like people are starting to address those psychological issues and things like that. Find the mental health issues, and it's definitely important. You can only Isolation is a tough thing to go through. I know that um, kind of not firsthand, but kind of secondhand, because my wife, has a chronic pain situation, and she's basically been at home, for years and years and years. So now we're seeing everybody else go through this, and you can see that as well. It's really, we can definitely relate is what I'm basically saying. And there's a lot of different weird places that your mind can go when you're by yourself. And one thing that and I actually like being by myself a lot, but I still need to be around people. I can't be by myself all the time. And that's one thing. I don't listen to like mainstream media at all. I think a lot of the pop news stations are just really focusing a lot on things that will give you more anxiety and give you more fear. But one thing that actually, Mike, you mentioned in a chat was um, that some of the local, sources are actually really helpful, because you can see a little bit more of a balanced view of things, and you can hear about, some positive stories and stuff that are coming through. And so I've been listening to local radio a lot, and one thing that they say is, first of all these people are continuing to do radio from their homes. And a big thing that they keep saying is stay connected, stay connected, connect with your family and friends. And I know this is a little bit off topic, because we're kind of talking about art and stuff, but one thing that I heard actually in an art stream recently, because they were talking, of course everybody's talking about this, so they were saying, well, it's kind of funny, because comic artists, this is like kind of what we do anyways. We just kind of stay home all the time. A lot of us, we just kind of are hermits, and it's like, so we're already like kind of experts at this to a certain degree. Sometimes that's at least kind of what they were just kind of joking around. But and it's totally true. Like when I have a choice to go out and do something, sometimes I'll go out and do it, but sometimes I'll just say, I'm going to work on my comic instead,
Mm-hmm.
But as all of us know in this group right here, we also have behind the scenes little chats and stuff. And that has been enormously helpful in those times. And I found myself getting a lot more done because I'm chatting with you guys and having a great time. And then I look down, we're about to leave, and I look down and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I just completed so much more of the comic than I would have if I sat there thinking about how the struggle of making the comic. You sit there and think about that, and you're like, and you quit, or you go take a break, and then you get distracted, and like that kind of thing. So,
Yep.
staying connected, I think, is definitely helpful, and that's to stay focused. That's one thing we can control.
Oh
Find
yeah.
ways to stay connected. I have a Discord. There's hangouts that people do. We have Discords as the 100s and stuff. There's a lot of places to connect nowadays. As long as you have an internet connection, a smartphone, or whatever, some kind of device, you can probably find a way to stay connected and stay
Yep.
focused.
Yeah. That's funny because, like, as much as we are kind of introverted
Yeah,
and
I think we can.
oh,
What?
go ahead.
I think we can actually count ourselves lucky. Like when you think about like like being in this pandemic. Besides the fact that this is kind of our jam, being locked at home. But like, I mean, for all the trouble so many people are really in, like I'm fortunate enough to work from home, um, but it the fact that it's happening in this day and age, and you have internet, and you have all these devices, all of us just have them lying around the house. Everyone seems to have a smartphone these days, so it's so easy to be, at the very least, be entertained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of just having to fill your entire day with just your thoughts. Like we all have the entire library of the world in our pockets. So
Yeah.
yeah, could be a lot worse.
A lot worse. Yeah. It's crazy to think about that things like this have happened in the past and people were just left in their own minds to just think. But then we've got a lot of great literature that has come out of those times too. And I wonder, are we going to get some like that? Like we're living through something like that. I'm
Yeah.
wondering what kind of stories, what kind of movies, all that kind of stuff are going to come from this. And like, will there be some history class like 20, 30 years from now saying
Yeah,
like,
I was
oh, go ahead.
I was watching Empire of Dreams just last night. Because we were making our way through all the Star Wars movies, and it's because I was born in the 70s, but I'm not conscious of it. But like the fact that they had a depression back then, and there was so much negativity just in general, like politically and like in movies,
Yeah.
and just what a breath of fresh air Star Wars at the time was. Like they really highlighted it by showing what was on at that time in the documentary. It's really cool. So I do think you're onto something there. Who knows what great new superhero is going to come out of this?
Yeah. That's interesting. How appropriate that they called it A New Hope.
In fact, I think Marsh just started work on a superhero comic, so it might be him.
If he's still here, he's going to emerge from the shadows. There he is.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. In the Discord, they started this new anthology, and of course, new project, and I just cling to it right away. But this one had a little bit of a deadline, so I'm like, okay, I have about a month to do this. I can take a month break from what I'm doing and then go back to it. So I'm doing this character called Expando, and it's a typical like stretchy, get bigger type of character, and it's just fun, fun superhero stuff. And I think, I don't know, superheroes are a fun thing, and it's kind of funny because I didn't realize that I haven't really done a superhero comic. I come from, that's the inspiration, superhero comics, but I've done everything but that. So this is kind of fun to finally like do a straight up, superhero thing.
Cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say in relation to what you guys were saying about things that come out of bad times. I can think of a million things that have come out of bad times, and because I think it gives you perspective. And I don't know if this is just me, but I think that sometimes when you're in a good place, your mentality shifts to producing. So you're like, I don't know, maybe it's like farming mentality, but it's like, okay, the conditions are good, so I'm just going to produce and continue doing what I'm doing. And then when something like this happens, it's an opportunity to see things from a different perspective and start creating things that are a little bit different. I guess that's where all that comes from. Because when things are good, I'm just like, I'm gonna keep doing the same thing and continue doing the same thing because it works and it's productive.
Really makes you rethink a lot of stuff. I know this is it completely changed my perception of the story that I was working on. I'm still kind of juggling what to do with that, but it's interesting because before all this happened, the story has somewhat of like a pandemic component to it, and considering that we're living through it now, it's drastically changed my perspective on the story that I was writing and the kind of message that I was trying to send with it. And it's interesting because in a different time it would mean something different, or maybe have a different tone or something. But that's kind of forcing me to look at my story in a new way. And because I am, at first I thought this is a bad thing, but yesterday I started thinking, this is actually a good thing. Maybe I don't have to change much. It's just now it's a little more informed. Now I can make it a little bit more, not necessarily topical, but influenced by this situation, the reality of it. I was writing something that didn't exist, and now I have like the most inspiration in the world. I could pull from what's happening right now and make it better, and maybe still send a message that's appropriate for the time too. It's interesting what that kind of perspective can do.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, because it's like, write about what you know. Well, now you know.
Yeah, right. Took a big chance with that one, but it paid off.
Hold on. Yeah, now you have all the information. Okay, so I think this is a good moment to jump to another point you made. I think this was you, Mike, and I like the phrasing: against all my better judgment from the past, start a new thing, a not fail project to trick yourself into succeeding at something small. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so Gaz is in the chat. He's probably, steam's gonna blow out of his ears when I talk about this one. Yeah, so you have like a big project, or you have a project that you really wanted to work on, and now you're stuck. You're stuck in miring in the sludge of this inability to function. Start a new thing. Give yourself a small thing. Maybe you're really having a hard time working on your comic right now. Work on something. Anything, do something that you can't fail at. So for example, I've been struggling to work on my comic. The big thing that I have left to do is to write, and right now my ability to focus and write is like completely out the window. If I get that silence and I'm typing words, I'm in my head. I'm not thinking about the story. So I've been just hitting walls. So one day I thought, well, it actually wasn't even my idea. It was my wife's idea, Mel. As she was leaving for work one day, she's trying to give me ideas of things that I could do. She's like, well, why don't you do this? I'm like, I don't want to do that. Well, how about you do that? I don't want to do that. And so she had said, she had mentioned sculpting, which I'd love to do, but I don't do it anymore. That's not like, I used to do a lot of sculpting for my career in film, because we'd make props and stuff out of clay and fabricate them and whatever. But so I was like, all right, what the hell? I've got some armature wire and whatever. What's the worst that could happen to make a stupid thing? But that's actually turned out to be like my go-to thing now. I'm having a good time with it. It showed me that, hey, you can do a thing, I framed it so that it's my character for my comic, and so that if it turns out all right, I can use it for, like, if I did a Kickstarter or something, I can do some mold making and make some statues and stuff. So it fell in line. I made it, fit what it is that I'm doing. But it's something that if it doesn't turn out, it doesn't turn out. And right now it's just something fun to do. Another thing was I don't want to get too into it because there's a lot of it's very open-ended right now, but I kind of started making my own I'll just say food item, and I could tell you guys off air, but I started this whole element of doing like a comic strip kind of illustration thing for the packaging. And so that's another thing that I can do. That's a small thing that I can do in a few days or so. That is very low risk. You see a lot of like craft beers and craft foods and stuff, at least in the US now, it's super popular that they do this branding of like naive art kind of thing. So it'll be very, very low risk again. Like I know I can make a little cartoon or a little strip or whatever, and it'll be completely appropriate and totally fine. I don't have to pull out all the stops and make some amazing illustration or anything. And that's something that I could succeed at, because the reason I say this is with mental health, and especially with things like depression, giving yourself wins, it gives you a boost of dopamine, and it realigns those receptors that remind you that you are capable. And sometimes we need that reminder. If you're trying to finish a whole 20-page comic and it's not happening that day, you might get a little discouraged. You might feel the weight of that project that you're trying to do. But if you try to make a little drawing, a little doodle, and that's your mission, and you succeed, well, there you go. There's your little positive boost for the day, and that adds up. That really, really matters. That gives your brain a win. It puts that little, I completely lost my sentence there, but I hope you know what I'm saying. It's
it gives you a boost. Yeah,
boost. It gives you a boost, and that's important. Right now, like, everybody's feeling anxiety, everybody's feeling, these different stages of grief and whatnot. And so if you can give yourself something real and tangible that you've accomplished, that you've done, that's a very good thing. It's a very good thing. Watching movies and stuff like that is all fine too. It does a similar thing, but when you do something for yourself and make these little minor accomplishments, they add up and they have lasting effects, because they give you self-worth, and they give you not only self-worth, but they give you that that reminder that you're capable and that there are things that you can do, which goes back to that idea of control. I might not be able to finish my grand magnum opus right now, but I can finish a 1-panel strip and post it on Facebook, So just anything, just don't do nothing, I think is the main point.
Yeah.
And hopefully it helps you get back to the something. That's the larger point. I'm not trying to abandon my comic. I'm trying to do little things that'll help bolster up my confidence to get to it. So,
yeah. There is such a thing as trying to, I think this relates back to what we were saying at the beginning, like knowing your limitations, being realistic about your situation, and just trying to get something done. And I think this again relates back to, 100 Days of Making Comics and everything that brought us together in the first place as friends. Is like the idea that you don't have all day to work on your comics and you have to make money. Yeah. You are not, Jack Kirby in a bullpen. This is not your reality. Mm-hmm. So what can you do in this reality and this is again the topic of the thing. Everything is connected. I'm having one of those moments and I cannot speak. But but to me, one of the things you're saying is I can completely relate, because the first 2 weeks when I was like the rabbit in the headlights, or as you said, the deer in the headlights, because you always have a different expression. One of the things that I started doing that I really wanted to do initially, but I started to do these past few weeks, was GMing narrative games.
Oh, cool.
And I've been, and in the past 3 weeks, I've been playing this game, and we've created this entire world of like a school that is in a nice forest. I don't know. It's cool. It's a fantasy. I like fantasy, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, I really got into it. And I think I've learned quite a few things about entertaining people with narration and how much description is boring, even in a role-playing game.
Wow.
So I am learning about storytelling, even though it's not what I initially wanted to do at that time.
Cool. Very cool. That's awesome. And that's that ties into what we were talking about earlier too, about hanging out with friends and staying in touch with people too. So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Everything's connected. It's like
it's almost like we planned this this topic.
It's almost like we have a script.
That's cool.
I think our friend Robert Johnston has a pretty interesting question in the chat. He says, does adversity help cause creativity?
I would say in a way, yes, because I don't know if I don't know where I got this. I might have dreamt it. I don't know. But I having this piece of information in my brain that humans initially started to build tools because their jaws weren't strong enough to actually break, an animal's skin. And so we had to carve these stones that could do what our teeth couldn't do. And so, you could have sat there as a sad little monkey and just go like, oh, my teeth are not strong enough. Or you could look at the rock and say like, look, I can use this rock to stab the animal as if it were a tooth. So I think in a way, humans work that way. When you are perfectly comfortable and happy, why would you do anything new? And this is what I was talking about the productivity mentality. That's a mentality to have when everything's going your way. But when things go south, that's the moment to actually reconsider and see things from a different perspective, which is the seed of creativity, seeing something from a different perspective. I think, I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well, that makes sense. You think about even just looking at the two big comic companies, Marvel and DC. They're adversaries, and because one did one thing, often the other would either mimic them or come up with something else to try to beat that. You could see that with like Apple versus every other PC out there. There's that. They're constantly driving innovation to try to beat their competitors. So yeah, I guess if it's us versus the virus, then maybe that is a motivator. Maybe that is something that motivates us to get everything in gear and get going. That a reminder that anything can happen, and our time is limited already, and it's time to get going and make our stuff, because you never know what's going to come along and change things. And yeah, I think adversity can. I don't know about cause creativity, but maybe encourage it. Maybe. Yeah.
I think that adversity, it can cause creativity. I think you're right. I think it's interesting that you kind of hesitated on that, because I think adversity causes people to do different things. Sometimes adversity causes people to, dig a hole in the ground and hide in it. Adversity definitely does different things. But I think it's interesting because that's where the cool thing is with adversity, is you can be creative, and I think it does cause you to think outside of the box. I don't. That's a pretty overused term, but it causes you to try to think of a different way to do something than what has commonly been the way that people typically do things. And I mean, we're seeing that obviously with the virus. It's interesting. The government has tried. I live in Connecticut, which is one of the harder hit areas, mostly southern Connecticut, near New York. My area isn't so bad, but you know, and I hear again on the local news, there's things that the governor's trying to do, and they're trying to get masks, and all these nursing homes and different places are like, well, where are our masks? I thought the government was going to give us this and that, and they haven't gotten them yet. Well, and then they're like, well, next week. By next week, it might be closer to over, and but then again, that's the radio station. There is one of the hosts of one of the shows, and they had a caller call in, and they actually found a source for masks, and then they started doing a drive, like a fundraiser to raise money to get the masks, and then they've been delivering those masks to these nursing homes in different places, and they've raised like they've gotten thousands and like hundreds of thousands of masks now to the state of Connecticut, because they thought outside of the box and were more nimble and able to do these things more nimble than the even government was able to. You think the government has all these resources. Well, the community actually found a way to get the masks, and I think that's really interesting. And we're also facing the same thing with the comic book industry, because right now, a lot of comic shops will probably go under, unfortunately, and also, Diamond has closed up shop, and they're kind of the hub of where comic shops get their comics, and there's now we got to start thinking of, is there maybe a new way that we can distribute comics, or is there a new way that we can deliver this entertainment to people? So it in some ways it can cause all kinds of different things. Adversity can cause all kinds of different things, but also, for people who are maybe not going to go hide in that hole, maybe they'll be ready to think of creative things to do something different than has been done before. Again, with that specific problem with the comic industry, I always think of Alterna because they're kind of already doing things that will help this situation before this situation even came about. So that's just one example, but in some ways it does, I think, create or cause creativity if you're willing to take the creative road.
Yeah. I had to step away, but I got the whole last thing that you were saying, and I completely agree. Everything about Diamond, everything about now there's even printers shutting down. That's all some serious problems that affect all of us that are forcing people to think of all kinds of new ways to. I'm hearing something crazy. That
Space Cat's acting up.
maybe I don't know. But yeah, that's going to force all of us to think of new ways to go about this. I mean, I don't know if you guys follow Billy Tucci on crowdfunding comics channel, but he was just talking about they had to find a whole new printer to print his comic because all the printers are shut down. And so he knows a guy who knows a guy kind of thing that's going to be able to print it. But what about everybody else? We're going to have to find solutions like that too. We at least temporarily, we might see a resurgence in like the zine sort of thing, the homemade printed sort of stuff. I don't know exactly what the real solution is going to be, but I think you hit it dead on that this is changing the landscape, at least temporarily, until everything can open back up again. But will Diamond stay open? Who knows? I mean, they thrive on getting that business, and they're shut down. I don't know how long they could stay shut down, but I don't wish anybody any ill will at all. But I do think that this is kind of a good time to see what's happened with Diamond, and hopefully maybe encourage some others to step up and create some more diversity in terms of how we distribute comics here in the US. I don't know how it works in Europe though. Do you guys use Diamond, or is it different
No,
distributors? Okay, so maybe
Diamond
that's
is an
maybe
American thing.
that's
I mean, here in Europe is basically a publishing house, a normal publishing house. They have deals with the bookstores and with the comic shops, and they distribute it. However, I do believe that if you get the comics from America, it is somehow managed by Diamond, but I'm not entirely sure.
probably. Well, that
If they're not
that makes more
translated, if
sense.
they're translated, they're filtered through one of our publishers.
Okay. Yeah, see, that makes more sense. Have the publishers handle it. That's what I wrote in my post too, is the publishers should try to figure out their own distribution. That's not a very uncommon thing. And maybe it's
Not at
something
all.
that we need to look at, for
Yeah,
comics.
in fact, it is so strange, the system you have in America. You have like a large distributor and then little publishers, two big publishers, and then little publishers that have to bow down to the distributor. And
Yeah.
it's such a strange system.
Yeah. It didn't used to be like that, actually. It's just Diamond was very clever with their business strategy. So I don't know, would that be too off topic, or do you want like a little 5-minute story about the
We can do 5 minutes. Go
Okay.
on. Go on.
So back in the 90s, my parents had a comic shop, so I used to hear my dad complain about this stuff all the time. We had Diamond, we had Friendly Franks, and we had, I can't remember the name of the other one. It was some weird thing like Pyramid or something. But anyways, there's 3 distributors, and the other distributors, they carried everything, and they were open to people buying from other places. Diamond wasn't. And so Diamond got really sneaky and started offering exclusive deals to different publishers. So they would say like, hey, if you give us exclusivity to that next title that you're going to do, then we'll give you a discount on, our warehouse space or whatever, something like that. So all these different publishers like Marvel, DC, they would distribute all their comics through every distributor, but like the big ones, like some big special issue or whatever, would be a Diamond exclusive. And so therefore then the comic shops were forced to go to Diamond to buy that book. But Diamond had rules about how you were able to purchase through their stores. So you couldn't just buy that book. You had to be on file with them. You had to meet like a certain quota to even shop with them at all. So that slowly but surely started forcing shops to buy exclusively through Diamond, pushing everybody else out. People used to hate it. I mean, there were major books that were coming out that, my Dad just couldn't get because he didn't really like Diamond. He didn't like working with them, but that was the only way that he could get that book. So then he was forced to go and buy it from other shops who had like overstock and stuff. It was silly. It was really silly. And I remember when Friendly Frank's closed down, he was not happy because something about dealing with Diamond was a little more expensive, and they didn't really care about the stores as much. They were more corporate, you know, whereas like Friendly Frank's had, I remember being a kid, it was awesome. They had this huge bin, like how you see in like if you go to the post office and stuff that they throw packages in to sort, they had this huge bin of like promo stuff, just like foil cards and posters and ash cans and whatever that were all just promotional stuff from Marvel, DC, independent companies. And it's just this big slush pile. And Friendly Frank's was like, here, you know, take whatever you want, give them away to your customers and stuff. We get it for free, you know, whatever. Diamond didn't do anything like that. They actually made you pay for some of that stuff, which was free. It was crazy. So very smart business wise, but those decisions really, I think, really hurt the industry. And there was no one to sweep in and say, hey, this is wrong. You're making it harder for shops. No one stood up for them. It just happened. And that's how they took over. And that's why they're evil.
Well, also, just the move from newsstand to newsstand and direct market, and then just to direct market.
Yeah, that's
was a big part of it, and because the comic industry found more money, it was like greed on all sides. The comic store found more money through direct marketing. They neglected the newsstand. I actually saw an interview with Jim Shooter because he was in the midst of all that, and he was trying to say we need the newsstand and the direct market. Yes, let's go to direct market. We're making more money there, but we need the newsstand to help promote and get people into the direct market. But we can't neglect that. And that's what they did. They neglected it. They went for the money, and they neglected what didn't make so much money. And now I feel like the industry, unfortunately, it has suffered because of it, for a long time.
I agree. I've met people that are surprised when I say that I make comics. They're like, they still make comics? They honestly don't know. It's weird. They don't see them in the grocery stores or in the little, turnstiles at the corner stores and stuff anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what you're telling, I love the story. By the way, is like you're here to avenge your father's business. It's like here's journey now. I love it. And I was just thinking about what you're saying, and also the fact that in circumstances of stability, that's when big stuff like big business and big people thrive. But as Marsh was saying, if you're an indie creator, you like, all I need to create stuff is here. I don't have any employees, I don't have anyone, so like my ability to be flexible and adapt is much more than anyone in any publishing house. So maybe when the fall comes, a lot of our indie comics are going to come out, and then people will have more money because there's nothing coming out from big publishers. Oh, well, something will come out, but like what I'm saying, like we have the ability to continue despite the circumstances, whereas some bigger companies that were taking the attention of potential readers and their money. I'm not saying that we're going to come out of this reach, but I'm just saying like the gap in the market has widened a little bit for indie creators that have more flexibility and less burden in their production with this situation.
I agree.
So that's a thing we can control. We can keep producing and just hope that we can get our heads in there.
Yeah.
When all the big ones fall, like when dinosaurs went down, that's when the little rats came out and controlled the earth, and that's where mammals come from. So
all the little monkey people. Yeah.
At rat monkey people, we came out of the swamps and started dominating the earth.
Yep.
And now lizards live in our house in a little glass house.
After the war with the reptile fish people.
I mean, there were bad times, but we came out strong because we were little.
I love it. No, I think you're totally right. I think especially because our platforms, we don't have to rely on being in a store already. Like our our whole strategy is different from Marvel and DC. You know, a lot of their strategy relies on hyping things up and getting you in the store to buy the book. But for us, oh, geez, there's so many people with so much time to do nothing but, you know, be online right now. So it's almost like the faster we can get our work out and just in front of their faces, even if we have to give it away. Now more than ever, people are consuming stuff online. I think about things like the little alien comic and stuff, or like the oatmeal and things like that publish all these strip cartoons every single day. Well, people are eating them up. Well, imagine when the economy is a little bit better and then those people want to publish a book. There's going to be people that have fond memories of getting through this time with that stuff. Like right now, sure, maybe you're not making any money, but if you're producing the content, I think there's a loyalty that people have to things that get them through hard times. So the best thing that we can do, in my opinion, is get our stuff out as fast as possible and as affordably as possible, as close to free as possible. Simply because I think in the long term, that's going to help everybody. You know, they're going to remember us. They're not going to remember, you know, Marvel and DC aren't going to be releasing free Spider-Man and Batman comics on Instagram and Facebook and stuff through this. That's not going to happen. But we can, you know. So
yeah, I agree.
I'm all fired up.
Absolutely. And I think it's it's interesting because you know, the bigger, like you said, we can be like more nimble and stuff, and like the even some of the entities are taking a cue from some of the things that the indies are doing. Right now, Todd McFarlane is doing a Kickstarter.
Yeah, $1 million in 2 days.
It's I'm looking at it right now. It's over $1 million. It's crazy.
Yeah. I used to worry about the day when the big names would come to that platform, because I thought it would crush indies if they were on it too, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm glad that it went well, and that's something that maybe even the big industries are going to be looking at, you know?
Well, there's always opportunity, and that's one thing too, that it's easy to see that, and you know, I've heard it sounds kind of cheesy. I've heard a lot of like motivational people and stuff talk about this, so it always sounds cheesy, and I don't even know if I've ever said this phrase, but the scarcity mindset. Just the term mindset bothers me sometimes, but
yeah, sounds like something a motivational coach would say.
Exactly. But there is something to that, the scarcity mindset, you know, to think, oh, Todd McFarlane's done it, now it's over, we don't have a chance, we can't do Kickstarter anymore. There's always a way, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, for another phrase that's used a lot. You know, but I think there's just like Teresa was saying, like opportunity has just opened up more and more. Like it was already really open. My thing is you know, I just want to be more ready for it. You know, I always feel like the opportunity's there. I'm just not ready. I haven't made my first like substantial actual book yet. And that's what I've been focused on until, of course, this new anthology thing came up again. But but that'll be like a month, and I'll get back to the plan. But
yeah. We lost Jan. He's gone.
Looked like he was having some connection issues.
Yeah. He says he's going to be in the chat. So, yeah. I think that's to round up, because I said this was going to be about an hour, and I don't want to take any more of your time. I would like just to talk about the last point, which I think we've talked a little bit about it, but one of the things that you can take time to do in this crisis, and I think this was Mike's point, is talk to friends. You were saying like this is an opportunity to sit down, work, and talk to your friends, because we're all home now. Mm-hmm. Well, no, not everyone. Marcia's not home. Well, Marcia's home right now. I mean, I'm going to shut up. Just tell us what you meant with that. Whose point was it? Was it Marcia or Mike's?
Oh, sorry. I thought, okay. I got
Tell me about your point, man.
Yeah, and talk to your friends, you know, like especially Well, I mean, I don't want to be, don't be exclusive. Talk to everybody. But what I was going to say is, especially your peers, people who are doing the things that you do and trying to accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish, because we're all in this brand new situation together. So, it really helps to get some perspective. Sometimes to, maybe even calm yourself down, or you never know how much you could help somebody else. I've had friends that have really helped me, just being there, and maybe even giving a positive spin on things, or allowing the kind of conversation to distract myself and let me actually get some work done. And then I've adversely helped some friends too that I didn't realize were in such a bad shape, just by being there. They suddenly got work done. That's so important. Like we tend to isolate when we're feeling bad because maybe we don't want to bum everybody out, or maybe you don't want to get into certain discussions or whatever. But just be honest with your friends too. If they start going down a dark road, say, hey, let's maybe focus on the positive or something. But definitely reach out to people. I've talked to people that I haven't even talked to in a long time. um, People in my family, friends I haven't seen in a while. I've had people reaching out to me that I knew in high school and stuff. It's interesting, but it's cool because you never know who needs to hear from a friend, and so don't be afraid to reach out to people. It's important. It's important for your mental health. It's important to keep your spirits up, and I mean, even just for that tiny little moment, you have that normalcy, that feeling of familiarity that we need. That helps keep the anxiety down. That helps keep the panic attacks at bay and all that. Just confiding in people that you love. And, you know, I think that's important. It's important all the time, but especially now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
absolutely. I mean, the community has kept me going. I know that for sure. I wouldn't be where I am creatively and in a lot of other things, if it wasn't for the community. For a lot of times chatting with you guys specifically, and a lot of other people too. And I mean, even with the Discord that I have, it's like I learn so much. I get so much inspiration from them. There's just it's just so much better when you're working together and you're bouncing things off of each other. Yeah, working in a vacuum is not really the greatest thing.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree, and I think this is a good point to close the conversation on. If you're struggling, oh well, we have questions, but they're not necessarily. Do you have 5 minutes to just go through the questions? Because I'm a terrible, live caster, and I haven't looked at the chat at all.
Sure.
I didn't realize there was a chat. Oh my god! All right, do you mind answering people's questions just very quickly?
Yeah,
Yeah,
fine.
totally.
You mentioned something, Mars. Yeah. So that's where you got the question. That's adversity help creativity. I was thinking, where did that come from? It's not in my notes. Um, so John the Third, great name, asks, how do you deal with the feeling that your artwork isn't good enough? We've touched on this at the beginning a little bit, but Mars, since you were the one that touched on this, what do you think?
Um, do it anyways. Make if you want to make comics or whatever it is you want to make, make it with the skill level you have. The only way you're going to get better at making comics is from making comics. The only way you're going to get better at making art is making art. And another one that's related, but I always say as well, and this was a huge one for me, was, I used to try to make, awesome art in my sketchbooks, and I had tons of sketchbooks laying around. I would just keep buying them, and I'd fill up like 3, 4 pages, maybe even more. But there'd be a lot of empty pages. Don't focus on making an amazing art in your sketchbook. Focus on filling the sketchbook up as quick as possible. And when you do that, focus on things that you need to learn. Maybe you can't draw, forearm muscles, or you can't draw eyes, or you can't draw faces, or you can't draw figures. I mean, when you first start, you can't draw anything. Draw a lot of ugly drawings as much as you possibly can, because the more ugly drawings you get out, the more you're going to be able to get to the good ones. And so yeah, you know, that's basically a more specific way to say practice, practice, practice. But you
Yeah.
know, I think those things are more motivational than just, hey, practice, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Jan in the chat, not right here with us, but in the chat, he's spot on. He's answered to John the Third, saying one thing. One of the things I had to learn was that feeling never goes away, and I can say for myself that is
True.
true. Every time I draw something, it's like, this is ugly, this is horrible. Then I get over it, but initially I always think it's horrible.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I would actually challenge the question though too, just in general, even for us. Like I would take the advice I'm about to say. Good enough for who? Good enough for what? You know, where is that even coming from? What are you comparing it to? That's so important to try to figure out why you're even feeling that and what you're comparing to. Because good enough for you because you enjoy art and you like to draw, then it's good enough. You know, it's fine. Keep doing it. There's, you know, whatever. But if you're comparing it to something far into your future, that might be a little bit of a dangerous comparison, or at least something worth looking at that from a realistic perspective. You know, okay, so maybe it's not good enough to work at Marvel yet, but how long have I been drawing? You know, what am I doing to train there, you know, to get to that point? Think about that stuff too. And when you figure out what it is that you're comparing to and what it is that you feel, you know, it isn't good enough for, then you can make a plan. Then you can say, okay, well, I want my art to be for this purpose. We'll look at other things that are being used for that purpose and then assess, you know, and make yourself a plan. How far are you from that point? And then start giving yourself realistic steps, you know, like if you do want to be like, you know, one of the best of the best of the best, then you got to draw every single day, all the time. And if you aren't able to, that goes back to what we were saying earlier in this stream. You know, don't beat yourself up over these unrealistic expectations. You know, if you aren't able to do 10 hours of drawing a day every day for months on end, you know, your progress is going to be slower, and that's okay. You know, I always find whenever I start feeling like that, look at what you've done 2 months ago, look at what you've done a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and you'll see that you're making progress. And that usually helps. It usually makes me feel better. You know, I'm making progress even though I don't see it. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Then Robert says Robert says in relation to John's question is find a circle of trust and get feedback, and don't be afraid of breaking those eggs for that omelet. That's a good one too. Yeah.
That's
what do you think,
metaphor.
Marsh?
I like that. I think that's an awesome metaphor. Yeah, and one thing to kind of go off of Mike's thing about, you know, if you have that drive to be the best, I think that's an interesting word, the best.
Well, I mean, relatively.
Because, yeah, no, I know what you mean, you know, because there's a certain type of person who has that drive, you know, to kind of, whether the best is really a thing or not, they still have that drive, and there's nothing that drive is valid. You know, if that's what you really that really motivates you, great, go for it. Try to be the next, you know, what is it, Kim Jong-il? I don't know how to
Sure.
say. You
Yeah.
know, try to be
Todd McGee.
good luck. But you know, that being said, the best doesn't really necessarily mean anything in art. You know, the best, you know, like I love what Mike was saying, like, who are you trying to be good enough for? You know, like they go look at Beavis and Butthead. Like, I mean, they built an empire off of bad drawings, you know.
Pretty much, yeah.
You know, so it's very relative. Art is there is a certain there are things that are better or worse, you know, as far as like the fundamentals of art to a certain degree. But when it comes down to it, it's also about expression. So be the most you, I would say, if anything, you know, the more you can get to being an authentic version of yourself. And this sounds all, you know, woo woo type of thing, but like it's like the more you can kind of, because to me, like, I grew up on certain influences, and I've grown to have much broader influences. But when it comes down to it, I really just want to make really cool action-packed comic books. That's where I really got inspired initially, and I've seen myself go away from that, and the more I go away from that, the more I kind of lose the passion for what I'm doing. And then when I come back to it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I'm excited to make comics. And so I need to focus on that thing that I really love doing. Just go for it, do the best of what that is you can, and keep doing it over and over until you get to a place where you're more satisfied with your art.
Yeah, yeah. And to add to what you're saying, I would say that maybe this is not true, but I feel like when you're doing your own thing and you're into your own thing, everyone's going to pay attention in the end. It's like, what is this person? Why are they having so much fun? What's happening over there? And it tends to happen in social situations, but it happens as well, I think, with whatever you produce. If you're having a lot of fun and creating a lot of stuff, people are going to be like, what's happening over here? And maybe you are not being the best of anything because you created your own category of whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
I think to tack on to that, one last thing is it could be a problem of maybe absorbing too much information too. Like I know if I spend too much time on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever while I'm trying to make something, I mean, geez, you're looking at what the world has to offer. I mean, there's so many things out there that are better than what anybody can do. Even Kim Jong-gi, I'm sure, is looking at art history and looking at people doing stuff and thinking, oh man, that's really cool. I need to try to figure out how to incorporate that into what I'm doing. Like we're all very similar, no matter where we're at on that path of that journey. We're all still artists absorbing things and thinking, how can we do better? So like Jan said, that feeling is never going to go away. So it's really important to learn how to kind of distance yourself from what it is you're trying to do versus what everyone else is doing. It's probably just fine. What you're doing is probably just fine. There's a movement that I saw kind of in the recent last few months or so, where there's somebody's all upset about how their cake turned out. They were making a cake and they're like, oh, this is a stupid cake. This looks terrible. And they bring it up to the table and it's next to like this beautiful cake. And it looks like it was made from one of those TV chefs and stuff. And they're like, oh, crap, that's not as good as that. But then they have the audience, the representative of the audience kind of comes up and they're just like, oh, 2 cakes. They don't care, It just do your thing. Who cares whether it stacks up to this or that or whatever? Yeah, I go back to that little alien cartoon. I think it's brilliant. It's hilarious. I look forward to every single cartoon. I mean, sometimes it really hits the mark. Sometimes it kind of misses it, and I don't get it. But I still wait for the next one. I love it. But I still like Kim Jong-gi and all that stuff. I mean, we are just do your thing. Don't worry about good enough. That's just going to destroy you. Just throw it out the window. It's good enough.
Absolutely. Like if you think about what the Beatles were doing at the time, I bet someone would have looked at them and think, compared to classical music, that is terrible.
Yeah.
Because being the best, you can only be the best when there's a standard and a person judging. And if you don't care about those standards and do your own thing, then you're the best because you're the only one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as long as you do it with passion and you get it out there in front of people, you always have that chance of making something new. Because being the best is only possible if you're following a path. But, if you want to be the best, be the best. But you will have to choose a specific criteria to determine what the best is. And that's boring. In my opinion, I don't know.
We got to start like a comic creator Olympics or something and find a way to measure every little aspect of it.
Right? I mean, you can't continue like this. This is chaos. Our next stream would be the commandments for the comic industry. Like, this is what it is to be the best. Number 1, number 2.
This is exactly how you have
I
to
understand.
do it.
Yeah, I understand the feeling of thinking like this is rubbish, and is exactly what Mike is saying, is because you have that standard in your head that you created. Either imaginary you, what you're capable of, or comparing yourself to an actual person that has done something.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you let go of that, you just have a lot of fun and create cool stuff.
Totally. I guess if you're still concerned about it, something practical that you could do is look at what you're looking at more critically. So if you're comparing yourself to another artist, study them. really like look at what they're doing, because I guarantee you, every single person is using little patterns and little tricks and little, what do they call them, ciphers, to make their
Yeah.
work. All do. So it's
Yeah.
just find that stuff. Look at
Yeah.
it. You see they draw
Absolutely.
shape every single freaking time. Learn that shape. Boom. Now
Yeah.
you're doing eyes like your favorite artist.
Yeah. We're all a bunch of hacks. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
colors.
terrible.
Colors are
Speak for
deceptive.
yourself.
Take a
No.
look at some of your favorite colorists and break that down. Like sometimes it's just good color harmonies and nothing more than that. Not to disparage what they're doing. It's
true.
good, but still, sometimes it's just understanding some basic stuff. Or take out the color from your comics. Oh, here's a great one. Check this out. So I just bought this before the world fell apart. This is Batman Noir. It's the Black Mirror story, but it's just the inks. And what I like to do when I can afford it is to get these kind of books, and then I get the other one that shows the color and stuff. And you'd be surprised how much is done with just the color. So like, if you don't want to be a colorist, I mean, you can get by leaving whole swaths of background out and stuff. Like, look at that stuff. Look at how it's made, and really think about what it is that you're getting upset about. Look at that. And so this is like an interior, and I don't have the book right next to me, but if you saw the final product, you'd probably be very intimidated. But if you look at this, there's so many other things removed from it that you can do, so that too, don't always just look at the whole and get disparaged. Think about the steps and what it took to get there, and then break those down and study those steps. Sorry, I'm getting all fired up now. Just stop beating yourself up and make a comic, man.
Chill.
Just chill, man. As I'm getting worked up. Just chill, man.
Hey, I mean,
you're in my channel. Here we're chilled, okay?
You can always, and whenever you have this problem, you can always look at Rob Liefeld's career and realize you can make a career out of not good enough. No.
No comment.
I love
Rob.
I think you're the only Rob Liefeld fan I know of, and you're constantly picking on him. What is this? What is this toxic relationship you have? We have to talk about this.
Yeah.
Right. I think we don't have any other questions. There was a person asking, what's your Discord, Marsh? And it was the AAA. I think everyone answered that because the AAA have infiltrated the chat. and well, I just wanted to thank you for coming by. Sorry, Jan couldn't be here for the sign off. And any last thoughts about the things we can control? What would you be your number one thing you can control, and what could you tell people to inspire them to get on with stuff in this situation? I love your thinking faces right now. You're both like
well, I mean, I think that that's one thing we kind of almost didn't touch on, is there's a lot you can't control in life. Whether you're going through a pandemic or not, there's a lot you cannot control. But there are some things you can control. Try not to focus on the things you can't control, and try to focus on the things you can, and do what you can with that. I love the I always talk about like the punk rock ethos and DIY and stuff like that. And one of the big tenets of what that would be is resourcefulness. If you don't have something, well, find out what you do have. I've had a lot of comments on my videos where people are like, well, I don't have this. I don't have a printer. I don't have, this tool, that tool. I don't have a computer. You can make comics with whatever you can find. If all you can find is like a bunch of cardboard by a dumpster and, whatever, a crayon, a box of crayons or something, you can find a way to make comics or whatever it is you want to make. Be resourceful. I mean, obviously it might not be the ideal tools, but it doesn't matter. People have done some pretty amazing things just with a regular notebook and a ballpoint pen. So do use what you have and do it, make it happen.
Cool. Mike, what do you have for us?
Wow. Well, I would say biggest thing that I can think of as a takeaway for all of this is self-awareness. Check in with yourself. If you're feeling really overwhelmed by what it is that you're trying to do, take a step back, meditate on that, figure out where that's coming from, and if it's at all possible, try and align yourself with the facts of the situation. Are you worried about what's going on in the world? Go to the World Health Organization, go to the CDC, go to whatever, factual place you can go to get the real information to temper your emotions about what's happening, get a realistic perspective on what's going on. If you're you're worried about your family, you're worried about your friends, call them, check in, see how they're doing. They're good? Great. Carry on. I think a lot of the anxiety, the panic, the stress of something like what we're going through now is uncertainty, and it's projecting what we think is going to happen in the future. So just reorient yourself. A practice that I use regularly in my life, even when the world isn't on fire, to cope with my depression, is orientation. So it sounds silly and stupid, but little things like, there's a glass jar in front of me with a bunch of pens. You look at things that are objectively true, and you orient yourself. I'm in my room. I'm in my house. I'm sitting in a chair. I have shelter over my head. There's food in the fridge for X amount of days, etc. Things like that. Look at the facts, look at your situation, and be realistic with yourself. That'll give you a much better perspective about exactly where you're at right now, not where you might be or what might happen and all that. Because that right now, especially, no one knows. No one can tell us. No one can project for better or worse. No one can tell us where we're going to go with this. Just now more than ever, live in the moment and do whatever you can with that moment. I believe in everything that I said, and even though it's a struggle for me now too, we got to get back to work somehow. We got to do what we love. Otherwise, what's the point of living? Like, you have to do the things that you enjoy. You have to create things that you want to create, and be there for the people that you care about too. I know that people that are friends with me and my family, people that love me, they want to see my comics more than ever right now. They're like, okay, come on, like, where's the next one? So that'll be good for them too. So just think about that. Reframe things, be in the moment, and make sure you give yourself some realistic perspective. Don't think too far ahead in the future.
Yeah, I feel like you cheated and you said like 5 things, but that was great.
I tend to do that. Overcomplicating.
Yeah, and to sign off, I will say that mine is, if you can join one of these communities of people that are also making art, and you can talk to art friends, I think it's the best way to get stuff done and to feel centered. Because while I was talking to this fine gentleman, I penciled 1 page. And so,
Nice.
I would recommend, if you want to take the 100-stage challenge, I think it's a good time to take it, join the community. Otherwise, join Marsh's Discord, AAA. And otherwise, if you have art friends that you haven't talked to in a while, well, why don't you shoot them a message? There's Zoom, there's StreamYard, there's no, Google Hangouts has disappeared. But, there are ways to talk to them and get together to do a chat while you draw, which is really cool, and I love it. Absolutely. All right, thank you very much for being around, guys. And once again, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me at donkeyjawprojects.com. That's my website where you can read my comics and sign up for the newsletter, and/or on social media as Marsh Comics on Twitter and Instagram.
Cool. And you can find me at Sisyphine Complex, just add a .com at the end of that, and that'll take you to all my socials. It's kind of like my portfolio site right now. I'm going to be, in the next week or so, I'm going to try to be putting up a lot of my, what I consider some of my better comics that I've made in the last few years up there for free. And our buddy Jan dropped out. You can find him at Yannemal on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, pretty much everywhere. That's YANNA. I'm losing the spelling. We could spell it somehow, right?
YANNEMAL.
Okay, there we go. It was He could type it.
All right. Yeah.
Type it
You
in
can
the
find
chat.
him everywhere except here right now.
Everywhere except here. That's awesome.
Right, and if you're here, this is my channel. If you want to click subscribe, you can do that. Otherwise, find me on Instagram, Teresa del Pilar, same name, but with underscores. And thank you very much for being here, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Until next video, bye-bye.